Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Unscrambled Faith podcast. I'm Megan Clark. In case you have not met me, don't know me yet, I'm Megan Clark. And you know what? I know it's been a little bit since I've recorded my previous podcast, and I definitely want to apologize for that. One of the things that I am determined to do is to get a little bit more consistent and posting and sharing a podcast at least once a week. I can't promise that it's going to be on the same day every week, because if you know me, and if you don't, I'm about to tell you, I typically a little all over the place. I do have consistency in some areas of my life, but sometimes I just want to record when the moment takes me, and but I am going to do my best to at least record and post and share at least once a week. But thank you so much for stopping by, however you came across this video, and I want to go ahead and just assume that if you did come across this video that you may not necessarily know me. So here's where we're going to do a little bit of diving into me, and yeah. So again, my name is Megan Clark. Thank you so much for giving me your time for for the time being, and thank you so much for hanging out. A little bit about me. So for those of y'all that have been following this page for a while, know that typically over the last 2 years-ish or so, this page has been predominantly training videos, things of that nature to have to do with my small business. I definitely want to take my YouTube channel to a little bit of a different direction, at least for the time being. Not to say that I will not be sharing content as far as training in my small business or things of that matter, but for the most part, I really want to go down this road as far as creating a podcast. Is something that's actually been kind of near and dear on my heart for quite some time. And it's one of those things in life that I feel like that everything happens for a reason, and we have different seasons in our life. And, I did get to a point this year where I was like, you know what, I feel like I'm in a good place to be able to do this and to try something a little bit out of my comfort zone. But I'm excited. I'm excited for this journey. If you don't already know who I am, I live in a somewhat small town south of Houston, Texas. And I am a small business owner. I've been a small business owner for almost 5 years this October. And it's definitely been a rocky little bit, I don't really want to say rocky, but like a roller coaster, as it would for anybody who's a small business owner. But I have had a lot of fun, a lot of experiences, and a lot of memories, a lot of laughs. Definitely some hills and valleys. But then again, when you are a business owner, who doesn't have, hills and valleys and bumps along the way? I feel like those are the things that honestly create more space for myself to be able to be more creative and learn to pivot and, work through the trials and errors. And I had thought about doing something along these lines, like a little bit podcast per se, about a year ago, and I dabbled in it a little bit, but again, the follow through. But yeah, so small business owner, I love to travel. I try to travel at least a couple times a year. Recently, I've started traveling more with my friends. I try to have at least one trip per year for myself, even if it's locally within the state of Texas. To me, it's still a trip, even if it's a weekender trip, just a little bit of a getaway. I love animals. We have a cat and a dog. And we do not have any children, but our dog Loki and our cat Kirby are definitely more than enough for us in this household. I have been married for a little over 5 years, so 6 years this June. No, just kidding, not June. My bad. 6 years this November. I was thinking about next month, and I scrolled because that's my husband's birthday. So yeah, so definitely not June. So 6 years this November. Yeah. But my husband and I have actually known each other for a lot longer than that. In fact, we've known each other for well over at least 10 years plus. We dated right outside of high school. That's another story for another day. But yeah, so we've been married for, like I said, for a little over 5 years. I did not originally have a small business over 5 years ago. I worked full time. I've had many upon many different jobs. Mostly, I would say in the realm of restaurant industry, sales, dealing with the general public pretty much. a little bit of a variety here and there, but for the most part, I would say that the restaurant industry and retail predominantly took up a lot of the time that I have worked since being in high school, which has been a minute. Yeah, so who am I? I love reading books. I love a variety of books. In fact, I actually just started getting into reading more documentaries and memoirs. I actually just finished Matthew McConaughey's latest book. That was incredible. Absolutely loved it. Took many upon many notes. Highly recommend it. On a side note, a little plug in there. Yeah, I don't really have, I would say, like one mainstream theme of like a book that I like. Definitely a little bit variety. And I've noticed that I tend to navigate towards like how I'm feeling in a certain season or for the certain month. I am a part of a book club, so sometimes I do like to nerd out with my book club, and I will say that I like to pick a book typically that coincides with like the holiday. I'm a sucker for a good theme, if you didn't notice that already. I love all things creative. I love working in Canva. I love putting together baskets for not only my friends and family, but my customers. I love pretty much anything that involves color. In fact, I'm very shocked that I'm wearing a gray tee currently today because, I mean, here's your color. But if you could see the rest of my office behind me, I typically love anything that is glitter, confetti, rainbow, colorful, period. Yeah, I prefer fall, winter to spring, summer, especially because living in Texas, I wish honestly that summer didn't even exist. And if it did, I would much prefer staying inside most of the time to being outside, which is funny because I do love to travel. But I am an extrovert when I need to be business wise. But at the end of the day, I am much more comfortable being an introvert. This is definitely doing something like this, like a podcast per se, is way out of my comfort zone. But I think it's important through not only like our personal lives but our business lives to teach us ourselves something new. You know, get out of our comfort zone again, learn something different. I think it's important for us to always constantly be learning, not only about ourselves but from others in return. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. This podcast, I don't really have like a direction, generalized direction that is going to be in as far as like topics that are discussed by any means necessary. If there's something that you want to toss out as a viewer, for me to discuss, but otherwise, I like the idea of letting my week navigate the topics that I talk about. A lot of times there's a topic that'll kind of like jump start in my brain, or somebody will bring something up and I'll add that to my list for like topics of discussion. But most of the time, I will say that whatever I'm talking about normally has something to do in conjunction with something that came up in my personal life, or maybe something I've discussed in therapy, which I'm going to apologize ahead of time if it's going to be one of those weeks. But otherwise, I feel like that, yeah, I just kind of like the idea of not having even like topics at hand that are pre-scheduled ahead of time. I do like to have like a generalized running list. So I think throughout the weeks, you'll notice that there might be a little bit of a running theme, but otherwise, we're just going to have some fun. So thanks again for watching this and joining me on this journey. And we'll see if I don't know that I don't really have a timeline on it. But I'm excited all the more for this journey just to try something new. So let's go ahead and get into it. So one thing that definitely has been a hot topic of discussion with some of my friends over the last couple of weeks has been friendship. So I figured I might do a little bit of a deep dive for a small amount of your time and talk a little bit about friendship. So for me, and I'm going to go way back to like, when I think about friendship, what's interesting is I think about like how when we were like adolescent age, right? Or like elementary school. And then over the years and going through like, different levels of education, like my friends changed. Like I remember at some point having, a group of friends where we would play typical back then of like house. I had friends. I would say that I never throughout my adolescent and teenage years even to honestly like my college years, like I never really had a friend per se that I would refer to as like a best friend or like a soul sister, like a soul friend. I did have one that I was really close with in high school, and we were friends for a couple years, and then like most situations at that age, drama basically came into play, and we went our separate ways, and it just was not that pretty. Um, and sometimes, for that specific friendship, like there are times where I will say that I'll have like a glimpse of a moment where I'll reflect back and, wonder like how she's doing or, what's going on in her life. And, at that time, like her and I, my friend that I had then, I wouldn't necessarily, I think at that time I considered her my best friend, but looking back on it, and especially with like how much time has passed, but also the fact that I do have true best friends now in my life. Like what's interesting for me is I would say like back then, like that particular person wasn't really my best friend. I feel like that I really referred to her as that because I feel like that back then that's like what you did, especially in high school, like you have your best gal pal, your best friend. And I feel like that's kind of like where I put her in that bubble. But like I said, looking back on it, wasn't really truly like technically a good best friend. And I'll say that for myself. Like I mean, so like same with me. Like that door swung both ways. Like I wasn't as good of a friend as I could have been either. But what's interesting too is like even back before that, like through, like I said, like elementary school all the way up to junior high, like I did have some female friends in my life that kind of like came and went. Not, I feel like that there's maybe like two or three of them that were consistent that actually even to this day in my, like I'm 35, so like my mid 30s, like to this day I do have a relationship still with some of the girls that I did go to school with throughout all of those years of education. And like I would say like we're not, same thing, like they're not, I wouldn't refer to them as my best friend, but I do think it's cool that at least three of them I've known pretty much almost since like elementary. And what's really nice is that we still keep in touch and we'll hang out every now and then, or I'll go over to the house, just say hi, or with my small business, like most of them are actually small business owners. So, we're always, seems like we're always purchasing things from one another or dropping things off at each other's houses. So I still do see them. And, of course there's social media, so we keep in contact through that as well. But other than that, like it's interesting for me personally to say that I never had like a true best friend in all those years. And, I can't help but think sometimes like how different my life would have been, like the course of the decisions that I made in my life, like how different it would be had I had a best friend throughout all those years. I do have some people that are in my life that have had that one person that's been a constant, steady friend of theirs, best friend of theirs, and they grew up together. And to me, that's like a rarity. That's a gem. But what's really special for me is I feel like that, like in my mid 30s, I do have, I would say, two best friends, hands down. One of them is for sure, without a doubt, I would refer to as my soul sister. We've got matching tattoos. Oh, that's another thing that I like is tattoos. A lot of people are actually surprised, or used to be surprised that I had tattoos until I added this one on my back arm, and then now it's a little bit more obvious. Because the other ones were hidden. But I have I've referred to her as my soul sister, my tattoo twin. So I have that person, and that person is my soul sister, but then I have someone else that I would definitely refer to, hands down, without a doubt, my best friend. But what's really cool is because I didn't have those people in my life for so long when I was younger, I feel like I just automatically assumed that I would never have a best friend. But what's intriguing to me is the fact that I am in my mid 30s, and I'm just now, over the last couple of years, have now gained, two individuals in my life that hands down, I refer to them as my best friend. I just think that's so cool. I like the idea that, I mean, yes, it's, it's fun to play with the idea that I could have, it would have been nice if I would have met both of them like at an earlier time in my life. But when I reflect back on like my journey and my healing journey and everything that I've been through and made it through over, the span of like 15 years or so, I don't think I would have it honestly any other way, because I feel like that when we're younger, that um, I wouldn't just say just females in general because males are the same way, but I feel like people in general can be so catty and can be so short with one another. And I feel like that, when you're growing up, like I remember as a kid, like there were a lot of times where if you didn't conform to what everybody else was saying or how they were behaving or doing that, you would you would stand out more, right? And then back then, it wasn't necessarily a great thing to stand out, and it wasn't really something you strived for. But what's really humbling, what's really nice now, is I feel like it's almost quite the opposite. Like, if you're not standing out, if you're not being your genuine self, then you're the one that actually stands out more because you're trying to be like everybody else or everything else. And I love the idea that now that individuality is cheered upon, that is excited, that, it's something that that we're encouraging more. Like, absolutely love that. Um, but like I said, I wouldn't have it any other way. I love the fact that, there's a deep connection, I feel like, when it comes to having friends now, in my 30s. And, what's interesting for me too is I had a lot more, I feel like, casual girlfriends whenever I was in my 20s. And, what's interesting is I do have one in particular person that I'm thinking of that I did meet in my like mid 20s, late 20s. And she and I would say we're actually still fairly close with one another. What's interesting with this particular person is that, I love the idea of like when you have a friend, and this person I'm actually thinking of, because I love when you have somebody in your life that it doesn't matter like the amount of time that passes between when you and that other person hang out, because when you do hang out, it's like as if time had not flown by like it did, and then you just kind of pick up like where you left off. Like, to me, that's like true friendship. I love the idea that, I don't have to and that's with in my best friends too. Like, that includes them. Like, now I will say that there is a sense of like loss, a sense of sadness and like emptiness, so to speak. Like, when I go a couple days or so, or even a day without like hearing from one of my best friends. But that's where good old social media comes in, because, I can send them a, virtual video or a voice message, just checking in and just saying hi. And, the nice thing about it is like now, that we're older, and we've got, one of them has like kids in their life, and the other one has grandkids in her life. And, and then, we're all working our own businesses, and, life in general gets in the way. I love the idea that, I don't feel inclined, like, I actually, like, it would be the end all to end all, like, if I didn't hear from them at the end of the day. Because, again, life happens. But what's important is that we do still check in with one another, even if it's just to say hi, or, sending, like, a funny meme, or sharing a reel, like, hey, I thought about you, and things like that. Like, I think making small connections like that with my friends are so important. And, obviously, like, I am a little envious when I do meet individuals that, like I said earlier, that do have friends that they had since they were, younger. And, but that's such a rarity, But I just think I always find that so fascinating at the same time, because thinking about like all of the different seasons, and the changes that, we go through like as years go on. And I love the idea too of, how you're intertwining your life in with like this other individual that you're really good friends with. In fact, like over the last couple years, I humorously had said that I had three really good friends, best friends for quite a while, right? And what I found interesting and fascinating was, I always like to say like the three of them possess the better qualities of myself. And I loved how I never once like hung out with all three of them at one time. It was always like an individual increments of time. And I absolutely love that, because I feel like that I have like one friend that her and I on like an intellectual level can have like the deepest conversations, right? And then I have my other friend that her and I are very much in sync when it comes to ADHD brain. And we're able to just kind of go on this like deep dive of nonsense conversation, which makes all the sense to us in the world. But we have our own little bubble, our own little world, and we can check out. And then before we know it, like almost an entire day has gone by when we hang out. And I love that her and I can just have like lighthearted fun and not take life so serious. But then, like, my third friend is actually the one that I have honestly gone through the serious stuff with. And her and I are able to have like the deeper, heavier conversations, the not so pretty conversations. Her and I basically can, she and I can basically just tell each other the blatant truth and not sugarcoat something. And I know that I can always go to this person for honesty, and for her to just keep it real and for me to tell me how it is and put me in my place, and vice versa. But I just think that's so cool. And that in itself, I feel like is a rarity for me to have like these individual interactions and connections with, these three people. It's just so cool to me. And it's so fun. But yeah, so I'm interested, if you're watching this, in the comments, let me know if you have somebody that you refer to as a best friend. Yeah, and just let me know like how long y'all been friends for, or like how did y'all meet. Yeah, so I hope y'all have an incredible week, and thanks so much for hanging out with me. And yeah, if anything that you could take away from this, don't forget to unscramble your faith and find clarity in the chaos. Bye, y'all.